Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Hitchhiking Ghost podcast. On today's episode, I have been waiting all month to speak about this. Well, not really all month, all of last month to speak about this, and I am talking about Halloween Horror Nights, one of my favorite events here in Orlando. It is, of course, at Universal, and I absolutely adore this event. I've only been going for 3 years now. I went in 2018. Didn't really have the best of times. I think I only went in like 3 or 4 of the houses. 2019, went in all of them. Loved every single one of them. And then 2020, of course, missed it. And then 2021, went. And this is going to be my review for the 2021 Halloween Horror Nights. I have been a little bit scared to go to HHN for several years before I finally just, told myself it's not going to be that bad, because I am a little bit of a scaredy cat. I don't like scary movies. I don't like anything scary, okay? So an event that was just Halloween themed, not really my cup of tea. So anyway, I put it off until 2018, where I finally was like, you know what, you just need to try it and see if you like it. First year, didn't like it. Second year, loved it. And then now I'm probably going to go every single year. And here's just a little tip for my fellow scaredy cats out there. I had a buddy who recently came down and did all the houses. He also is a little bit of a scaredy cat, so I told him, said, if you don't want to be scared as much, you just need to find a spot in the distance, like someone's back or something. You just need to stare at it the entire time and just let your peripherals see, all the, scary hands, scary monsters popping out at you. But other than that, just look straight ahead. Don't be bothered by anything else. Just be completely focused, okay? And he did that. He actually liked the event and is going to return next year. So it works. Now that I got that out of the way, I'm going to give my overall thoughts as well as my thoughts on the scare zones after the main portion of this video, which of course will be the haunted houses. There were 10 of them this year, and I'm going to do a top 10 for y'all. Without further ado, this is last on the list, number 10. And it is going to be Welcome to Scary Horror in the Heartland. As I said in the beginning, I'm a relatively new fan of Halloween Horror Nights, so this house doesn't really cater to me, as it's more of a history buff's house, because this house is actually, it pays homage to the very first HHN house that ever existed. And it just seemed very disjointed to me. I didn't really understand what was going on. It just wasn't a house for me because, of course, I don't know all of the history about HHN. So this is going to be a theme in this video a lot, that this year was catered to the true fans that have been there for years. And coming in as a newer fan of it, it just wasn't really the type of properties that I was expecting. But that we'll get into that later. So at number 10, Scary. Welcome to Scary Horror in the Heartland. Never really knew what was going on. There was one scare in the very beginning that was pretty cool. It got me. And that was with the masked man with the chainsaw in the very beginning. He pops out right in front of the facade, and he pops out at you and gets the chainsaw going. And I was like, oh, wasn't expecting that. Those are usually the ones that get me the most because I'm not expecting it. The ones in the beginning of the houses, and then the ones at the very end of the houses where you can see the security guard and the team members at the very end. You see the light at the end of the tunnel, and then 2 years ago, Frankenstein pops up at you and just glares at you, and you're like, oh, goodness gracious, that scared me. So, number 10 stands alone by itself. I just didn't really enjoy it. It wasn't a house for me. Now, going down into the 4th tier, which is going to make a lot of people upset with me. And at number 9, I have Beetlejuice. Now, this is probably one on plenty of people's lists. I mean, many people that I've heard speak about this event, they have Beetlejuice pretty high up on their list. But here's the thing with Beetlejuice. Again, it's a house catered to the fans because it is a perfect summary of the movie. Just like the Ghostbusters house was 2 years ago. Luckily for Ghostbusters, I was more of a fan of the Ghostbusters house because I was more of a fan of the movie. Now, Beetlejuice, I just don't really connect that well to the property. So this house just didn't really do much for me. It was insanely popular because every single night I went, there was just long waits. And every person that I went with was always like, we gotta hit Beetlejuice first because the lines will just get ridiculous the later on through the night. So I went through Beetlejuice quite often. It's number 9, second to last. It's just, I was very young whenever I watched Beetlejuice, okay? And I just never cared to revisit it again. It wasn't really my type of movie. So I didn't have the fangirl moments whenever he's up in the tower and saying, oh, I don't even know what he says. It's showtime. Golly, I'm terrible with impressions, but you understand. Like, people, oh my gosh, we're going crazy about it. And then one set I did really like was in the waiting room. That's one scene that I remember from the movie, and it was recreated perfectly in the house. That is one detail that I had to bring up because honestly, it was really cool. But for me personally, I miss the huge houses, like the properties that I really enjoy, like Stranger Things, Us, Killer Clowns from Outer Space, Halloween, and stuff like that. Stuff with properties that I enjoy. Beetlejuice does not fall under that category, which is, sad to say. Because I know it was universally loved. Pun intended. At number 8, I have HHN Icons. Icons Captured, okay? Again, it's not my type of house. I don't connect with any of the characters. I mean, Jack is cool, but I'm not just like fangirling over him like I've seen many, many people do. I was waiting in the line one day, and there was like a cast change. So you saw all the actors come out with their costumes on and all that stuff. Jack's, all the different icons. And people just went bananas. Like, it was just absolutely absurd. They're like, Jack, Jack, Jack. And I was just like, I just don't connect with Jack, I don't understand the appeal because apparently he has been involved with HHN for many years, and I just don't know the backstory of this guy. I don't know the story of this guy, so I just don't really care about this guy, to be honest. He's a clown. Good for him. I'd rather see Pennywise than Jack. I know that's terrible to some people, but to me, that's what it is. I think it did a great job paying respects to all the characters from years past. There was one character that I really like. I like Chance. She's a really cool character. She was like really underrepresented in the house. I remember one scene where she was up on the throne, and that's about all I remember from her section of the house. It was mostly like the director and Jack, and all that. There was only like one set with Chance, which was odd. But again, not the house for me. I'm not going crazy for any of the characters, which a lot of people were doing. So at number 7, I have the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Again, another IP I just don't really care about. I think the sets in this house were pretty cool. They were definitely really cool. But honestly, not really into the chainsaw gross out type of horror. It's not really my thing. And there's a bunch of it in this house. Lots of guts and gore. And there's also a section in this house, which this was probably my favorite part of the house. You go into a slaughterhouse. And all these pigs and stuff are there with pigs, scare actor pigs. And these pigs make it smell really, really bad. Like, whenever you get to the pigs, you start smelling something and you're like, what is that smell? And I don't even know what it is, but it smells disgusting. And I think it's just a cool little... I like whenever you get to use more than one sense to experience a house in. So I love the different types of smells, and that goes with everything. Like with Rise, like E.T. The only reason why I go on E.T. today is feeling air conditioning, which is one, and also the smell in there, which is, it's a really cool smell. So Texas Chainsaw Massacre, just mediocre, non-IP I care about. Chainsaws though, a lot of chainsaws. Now we are breaking into the third tier with 6, 5, and 4. And at number 6, I have Case Files Unearthed, Legendary Truth. I love the last scare, okay? One scare just pops out in my mind. And actually, one or two pop up in my mind. There was one scene where there's just a shadow and then a guy shooting like a demon on the wall, a demon shadow. And then my favorite scene is at the very end when you're walking through a hallway. You're about to turn left, and on your right, there's just this giant demon coming out of the wall, like reaching out at you. Like a giant devil head, which is very frightening. But it was cool. It was really cool. It had some incredible sets in it. I loved the setting. Loved the narration. I loved the different scenes that they would just bounce around to. It just made the house more dynamic. Didn't know what was going on in the house. Apparently there's little Easter eggs hidden throughout the park. Beats me because I didn't understand what was going on the whole time, but I still enjoyed it. Definitely not my favorite one this year, but definitely not the worst one. Just, somewhere in the middle. A little bit better than mediocre, but not great. And breaking into the top 5, I have Universal Monsters, The Bride of Frankenstein Lives. I loved the Monsters house from 2 years ago. It was arguably my favorite house of that event 2 years ago. Paid respect to all of the monsters that came before, which pretty much made Universal Pictures back in the day. This house this year didn't pay respects to the big monsters like Dracula, Creature from the Black Lagoon. It was still cool. I love the different... It didn't have the different settings for each monster, which was very cool. It just had the different settings between Frankenstein, like the story of Frankenstein, and the Bride of Frankenstein. It was a good house. It wasn't a great house. It was a good house. There were some awesome sets, great scares, and it was a good story. And it is a good house to start off the top 5. And at number 4, I have the second original house on this list, which is The Revenge of the Tooth Fairy. Those creatures in that house, they were freaky. Okay, they were truly freaky, and I thought the idea for this original house is really funny and awesome at the same time. What happens when the kid doesn't give up the tooth? Monsters come and they're gonna have that tooth. Okay, such a funny twist on all of our childhoods, And the storybook start, I mean, come on. With the narration had to be one of the best starts to a house, I think, of all time. And it is so great. Like, the starts of a house, it really puts you in the mood. And this start was incredible. I loved it. That's like the one thing that like it is stuck in my mind, the start of this house. And then to have the little cardboard cutouts go from back and forth, and you're like, what is this? And then it hits the fan. It gets really, really scary. And it's a solid house, okay? But let's just say that, again, a lot of Horror Nights fans clicked off of this video when I put this ahead of Icons and Beetlejuice, because my goodness, they love that. They love those two houses. But let me just put this caveat in here. It's my opinion. You can have a different one. I'm just speaking from a guy that's only been there 3 out of the 30 years. So I'm just speaking from my 10% expertise. So that's all I'm going to say. With that out of the way, we can have differing opinions. It's okay. Now, breaking into the top 3, we have, and this is where I saw it's like a little steep drop off from Tooth Fairy to the Puppet Theater, Captive Audience. The front facade is quite possibly the best one of all the houses this year, and it really started the house off right. Was expecting a bigger scare at first, but they didn't get you. The sound design with the creakiness of the theater being destroyed is awesome. It gets you really feeling the vibes before you even walk into the house. Also, another smell factor that goes into this house, which adds to the experience. Like I said, I love feeling more senses to experience things with, and it just makes it a lot better. One scene in particular that sticks out to me more than anything. There's one scene with a broken down opera theater stage, which is pretty cool scene. But the one scene that pops into my head the most is whenever you walk past the theater and you're like in the wardrobe area, and it's just a closet of hanging clothes, and you're like, you can just feel it in your bones that something is going to pop out of that closet. I don't even know if anything pops out of that closet. I never got scared with that scare personally, but there very well could have been a scare in that closet. I think that's one of my favorite things, whenever you can feel a scare coming on, but it never happens. So you just have all this anticipation built up until you finally get a scare, which is a minute down the walkway, which is really funny. So you just get amped up for no reason. You get anxious for no reason. It's really cool and creative scares, by the way, with lots of hanging. And this is one of my favorite houses this year. A great one to start off the top 3. Now, going into the top 2, I have Wicked Growth, Realm of the Pumpkin. This is another one that was universally loved by the whole community. And this is the last house in the second tier. As number 1, in my opinion, stands alone from this year. It was incredible. But let's go to number 2. Interesting facade. The glowing pumpkins really set the vibe. It's really, really cool. Great theming and sets throughout the house. Very creepy, very like cramped. I think it's one of the more claustrophobia inducing houses, because there's things hanging from the ceiling. There's things popping out of left, right, down on the ground. Actually, that was just a joke, but in one section of the house, you look down. It's like crossing over like a bridge or something. You look down and there's like little pieces of glass that you can see through. and it looks like they're holes. It looks like they're holes. The first time I went through this house, first and second time I went through this house, you could, like, you knew it was glass, but you, at the same time, you couldn't really decipher that because, I mean, the glass was spotless. You know how Michael Scott ran into his sliding glass door? That's what I was feeling. It was spotless, okay? The deeper into October it got, the more you could see smudges appear on the glass, which was unfortunate, but it's going to be the case because you have so many people walking on that. This event was crowded every single night I went. But again, number 2, really solid house. One of the best this year. Now, going into number 1, this is... whenever I first heard that this was going to be a house, I never would have guessed in 1,000 years that this would be top of my list. But it is. Number 1, first tier. The Haunting of Hill House. This is the only house in the best tier for me, and it started that way from the first time I stepped into it. The front facade, pretty lazy. I mean, it's just the cover art of the series being placed on it. But as soon as you walk into the house, the home from the show is just over you and is huge, and you can feel the dread creeping up inside you, and it's a really cool part. And then you can hear the whispers from the show, and to be honest, never seen the show, so I walked through this as an original house. This house was able to scare me the most of all of them, with scares coming from all over the place, left, right, from the ceiling, from the floor. You had people swiping at your legs. It was scary. It was really scary. Dynamic. It was awesome. You like moved through the house. Never watched the show, but you moved through the different scenes in the show. Well, different sections of the house in the show. I don't know the exact scenes from the show, but it was definitely fun. Definitely a fun house. And even the Tall Man, I actually looked up the name, and it's literally the Tall Man, makes an appearance and happens to be very tall. And whenever there is something extremely, like, it's a person, but they're extremely bigger than you, it like sends, I don't know what it is, but something inside you like, oh my gosh, that is terrifying to me. The house is so good that it doesn't matter if you watch the show, if you watch the series, but I'm sure that you would probably get a better experience because you would actually know what was going on. I was just enjoying it because the scares were creative. It was really interesting. And yeah, okay. But I never watched it. I'm not that big into the horror genre, but with that being said, I enjoyed this house so much. Even with it just being an original house for me, it was fantastic. One scene that just pops out in my head was so simple, but so scary. It completely, I'm going to try and recreate it here shortly. It completely takes your sight away from you. Like, I mean, pitch dark. Like, they did a tremendous job completely robbing you of your sight. And during this section, like, you feel extremely vulnerable because you can't see anything, and the anxiety builds. Like, you know something's going to happen. The anticipation is just getting to you. And you hear kids whispering, and you just can't see anything, which is terrifying. You almost, I know this is what I did, you almost have to make a conga line with the people in front of you. Like, one after another, just making your way through the dark. It is truly a terrifying part. Very well-rounded house, and just awesome. Okay, it was the best by far, and not even an intellectual property that I enjoyed. Now, with that out of the way, I gotta get into these scare zones. The first one is 30 Years, 30 Fears, which was basically, let's be honest, it was a nightclub. Barely saw any characters walking in this area, but there were several characters dancing on stages, which really made you understood that this event is for 13 years old and older. Just wasn't really a great zone, in my opinion. In the Hollywood section park, you could find Lights, Camera, Action, Eddie's Revenge. Eddie is Jack's brother, again, playing to a character that HHN made up. It's a character I do not care about, so didn't really care about this house. Didn't really care about this scare zone. I mean, sad to say, but it does happen to be true. But with that being said, it was still probably my favorite scare zone. And that is because there was some weak competition in the scare zones this year. It was just, once again, it was just a celebration of the past, which I understand. Anniversary year, big milestone year, 30 years. I mean, that's insane. I just haven't been here for the 30 years, so I just couldn't really, connect as well. With that being said, I still went a lot. Now, in Central Park, Gorewood Forest could be found with plenty of cool characters. The costumes in this zone were creative. They were probably my favorite costumes of anybody. They just look so crazy and so weird. They're like beavers, but crazy looking. And you had evil Splash Mountain looming over you everywhere. There was some lady dipping people in poison gas or something. I have no idea what was going on, but it was dynamic. It was interesting. There was always something to see. People scaring you. It was a cool little zone. Springfield. Here's something that I want to bring up. Springfield. It was not used as a scare zone this year. Usually, in years past, there were lots of clowns with chainsaws walking around. That was not the case this year, which made it feel a little bit empty. And I was pretty sad about it, actually. In San Francisco, Crypt TV could be found, another IP that I have never seen. And they even made it so easy for me to get connected with that IP so I could actually know who the Look-See was, which is a character, apparently. Because on the official Crypt TV YouTube channel, they have a playlist that says Official Crypt TV HHN Prep. That was a separate playlist on their YouTube. I never knew about it. I didn't watch it. I should have watched it. Gosh. And I was just so confused with what was going on. I had no idea. I did like the Look-See and a performance on stage which the only way I can describe it as is bizarre. It was bizarre, okay? In New York, speaking of bizarre, Seek and Destroy. I don't even know what it's supposed to be, but it wasn't very scary. If that was the goal for this section, they missed out. And honestly, it was just a very weak section to me. Very weak section. Just lazy costumes. Here I am going on a rant. I'm going to calm it down. Just not really my thing. And continuing on with this rant, with the houses and scare zones broken down, I have to break down this HHN year even more. There's only one house that I can honestly say could hold its own against the great houses from 2 years ago. Whenever you think of a lineup from 2 years ago, there were insane intellectual properties like Stranger Things, Us, Ghostbusters, Universal Monsters, Killer Clowns from Outer Space. All 5 of those houses would be at the top of the list from this year. And that's not even counting the original houses from this year, because the originals would destroy every original from this year. Yeti, Terror of the Yukon, great house, Depths of Fear, and Graveyard Games. Those were 8 houses that would beat every single one of these houses except Hill House. Hill House was the only house I could see being able to hold its own in 2019. I just felt that most of these houses were not made for me. It was a large anniversary year, so I understand the appeal of icons and scary. But sadly, I am not a long-term fan, and to be quite honest, I don't think a lot of people knew about scary and all the icons. So I just felt a little bit left out of the loop for this year. I still enjoyed it. Don't get me wrong. Still enjoyed the event. Can't wait till next year. And honestly, I plan on being at the 50th. So at the 50th anniversary, if there is a huge anniversary year, like to throw back to Jack and to throw back to like all the years prior, I'm going to enjoy it a lot more because I'll have a lot more experience with it. And I'll be able to enjoy it. I'll be 40 plus years old enjoying that event. And also, I would like to add, these houses, it's kind of hard to scare people when you can't literally jump out at them, because they practice safety in these houses. I mean, go and Beetlejuice at the very start of the house was 20 feet in the air, and he was wearing a surgical face mask, which distracting to some, annoying to some. They're being safe, so I can appreciate it. And also, a lot of the scares I could describe as lots of strobe lights. A lot of the scares were scary people hitting on a shower curtain constantly with loud noises and strobe lights, which I would like to recreate. Run the clip. Alright, now that that's out of the way, I just wanted to throw that in there because though I felt so goofy recording that, it was hilarious. I still went several times and had a blast every single time I went. I went with friends. I went with friend. I went even by myself. Enjoyed it. Enjoyed them all, It's just a really great event. The energy there is just infectious. It's palpable, to be quite honest with you. Like, you can tell that everyone is excited to be there, and you can feel it. You can honestly feel it. Now, the scare zones might have been a dud for me. The houses might have been a dud for me, but I can't wait till next year. And if you get a chance to go, definitely try and go. Even though the houses were weak this year, it's going to be better next year. I am very excited for it, and I hope you are too. So that will conclude this video. I know it's a very long one. My voice is getting a little bit raspy. But I appreciate you all for listening to me and watching. And if you did enjoy, feel free to leave a like or subscribe to the channel. Really would mean a lot. And have a wonderful day, everybody.